Órale. The Barrio Love Oldies, that kind. Órale.
What's up, everybody? It is I, of course, your girl, Miss Crystal Marie from Barrio Love Oldies, right here back on episode number 12 with none other than Arsoulnal. Thank you so much for being with me today. Super excited. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
Yes, I'm super excited to get to know more about you.
Right
And
on.
why don't we jump right into it? Where were you born and raised?
So, I was born in a little small town called Merced, right in the middle in the Central Valley between Fresno and Modesto, like 40 miles apart from each other. I was pretty much raised in Merced and El Centro, Imperial Valley, so I was kind of like up and down. Also lived for a little amount of time in Mexicali, right across the border from El Centro. So I was pretty much raised up to the age of 12, I believe. And then I just stayed up north, you know. But originally, I mean, I grew up back and forth from El Centro to Merced.
Okay, this is super weird because my mom was born in Merced and I am from the Imperial Valley.
Oh, wow.
And all my family's from the Imperial Valley, and I have family over there, like in Merced area.
Yeah, I have family in the Imperial Valley, Indio. I have family in Calexico, but mainly in Centro. And then part of the other family lives in Mexicali as well. That's crazy.
So dope, right? Yeah, so you're familiar with my area. I've never been to Merced. Although we've traveled, like, you know, passing by, but I've never been there. My mother was born there, but I've never personally visited it. I heard like it's like a rural area, right? Like a rural town?
It's got its I don't know. I mean, it's a small. It's not like a big or small town. I would say it's just average.
Like
you
in
know,
Central?
like kind of a little bit bigger than El Centro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
but yeah, the you know, ever since, I mean, as far as I can remember, I mean, we would, my dad and my mom, we used to travel all the way to El Centro, you know, for family functions, you know, because I come from a big family, and I was always, you know, like, man, you know, I want to live down here in El Centro, but the heat is just too hot, you know, and
Yeah.
I was like, I just can't. I would go over there and enjoy the summer with my cousins, and then we would drive back to Merced the following week. So it was like, you know, I got used to being at both places. You know what I mean?
Is it extreme, like, weather difference, like from Merced to El Centro?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, El Centro, I believe, like, that whole piece of land, that valley is just below sea level, so all the heat kind of traps inside that valley. So it's a lot hotter over there than what it is in the Central Valley up north. Up north, at least we have, you know, we got like, it's not like, you know, you when you sweat, you know, you feel all sticky, humid, and all that stuff. It's not like that over here. So.
Well, I lived in Sacramento for some time, and even though I understand what you're saying, like the climate is different because Sacramento will get hot too, you know, like just as hot, but the heat was different. It was more tolerable up north. So definitely. So where'd you go to school? In Merced?
I went to Merced High. Was one of the oldest high schools in Merced. So, and then I was always going through different elementary schools, and then I went to Rivera Junior High, Crookshank Middle High, and then went into Merced High School. But I believe, like in seventh grade, I was in seventh grade. I went to middle school in El Centro. Like I said before, you know, we were always traveling back and forth. So there was a temporary time when I went to school out there in Imperial Valley. made some friends and stuff, you know.
That's so cool. And were you traveling back and forth because your parents, like, because I know, like, it's a lot of agriculture. Like, did they work in agriculture, or you guys would just travel back and forth just because?
Well, my dad, he used to love to travel all the time. You know, my dad was, he worked for a company, a lumber. It's like, what do you call it? It's something where they chop wood.
Uh huh.
So he pretty much was one of the supervisors at the company here in Merced. So he was always getting vacation time, and my mom, she was like a stay-at-home mom. She would, take care of us, me and my brothers and my sisters, and things of that nature. Um, but yeah, my dad was fortunate enough to establish himself having a good job. You know, he never worked at the fields or anything like that. I have uncles and aunts that were working in that type of environment.
Yeah. So, what was your life like growing up? Like, I know you said a lot of traveling, but what was it like, with your parents? Like, you had both your parents, siblings. What was it like?
Well, I mean, I grew up with both my parents. I grew up with a lot of family, a lot of cousins. Made a lot of friends. It was a great adventure. Knowing that my dad was always, traveling. And he was more family oriented. Always wanted, the family get-togethers. But coming from a huge family, like we have family all over California, so still to this day, they still organize family reunions and things like that. But growing up, I mean, with my parents, my mom and dad, there were that couple that were just everything they did, everything that they involved themselves to was just out of fun. So I grew up, like in a happy home, so to speak. Yeah, we had our downfalls and everything like every family has, but we weren't the perfect family, but my parents made the best to try to raise us the righteous way, and and just go about that.
That's awesome. And how did music come into the picture? Like, what kind of music did you grow up listening to?
Well, music, that's always been a part of our family history from generations. Dating back to my grandpa, he used to play conjunto norteño in Mexico, in Sinaloa. So I think that's where the roots began music for me, because at an early age, my mom and dad were, they were into, the cumbias, especially my mom. She was into like the oldies and, things like that. So music was always being played at our home all the time. My dad was a record collector. My mom, she was a record collector as well. So they both established themselves, loving music and introducing music to my brother, my sister, and me myself. So I kind of got attached to that, and yeah, and then my uncles, they were into music. My uncles that lived in Mexicali, what kind of tripped me out though, when we used to go to Mexicali all the time, my uncle would play these records for me, and he'd be like, "Hey, check it out, mijo, this is what I listen to." So he would play these records, and I remember there were like these compilations, like they have the compilations now, but these were compilations in records, like the oldies but goodies. There was one called 20 Hits Old Memories, and that one had a lot of good songs that are featured on like East Side Stories and other projects. And I remember my uncle playing this song called "Groovy Baby" by Billy Abbott and the Jewels. That song in particular stuck out to me because it's a soul rolla, but it hit different at that moment. At that time, at that early age, I must have been like 9 or 10. I didn't know anything about that style of music, but he was always like, this is what I grew up to. This is what we were listening to in the barrio, in the neighborhoods. Because he did a lot of traveling as well. He was always coming up north to Merced and whatnot. So he pretty much introduced me to a lot of oldies, which back then, they were considered oldies, and soul music and so forth. So that's pretty much how I adopted myself to this form of music.
So your uncle's from Mexicali?
My uncle's from Mexicali, yeah.
Wow. And in Mexicali, I would trip out because they have a lot of good Spanish oldies. Like things like I'd be tripping out on, like, have you heard of those?
Yeah, they have, there was this group, I really can't pinpoint the name, but there was a group out of Mexicali, and a few band members were out of Calexico, because Mexicali and Calexico are just right across the border from each other. And there was a group called Los Matadores, and they did a few cover songs. I think they did Donna, they did We Belong Together, like the Richie Valens songs, But there were a Chicano Mexicano group. They were called Los Matadores. And I remember my uncle introducing me to some of their music because he had their 45s, and he also, he gave me knowledge on a lot of groups from Tijuana, TJ, like Old Memories, TJ Soul, Los Moonlights, Los Corazones Solitarios, just groups out of TJ, and they sang oldies, the style of those at that time they were ballads, so that's what kind of hooked me into collecting this type of music, were the ballads, that right there is just that particular style of music is what introduced me to wanting to know more, and began my adventure from there, doing a lot of research, but my uncle was more schooled on a lot of the music that came from the border on that side of town,
Yeah. Were you always into oldies? Like,
oh yeah, I mean, I was always into oldies. During my teenage years, I started getting into like hip hop, because that's another one of my main sources, which is hip hop. I collect a lot of hip hop albums from like the 80s and 90s up to the thousands, So I got into that during my teenage years, and I kind of just put the oldies to the side. I kind of grew out of it. So I thought it was just a phase in the beginning. I'm like, I'll listen to that song later or whatever, and just started, getting into hip hop, hanging around with friends that were into it. And then up until like 15, 16 years old, I started getting back into the oldies. I had a friend that, hey man, check this out. He had a cassette. He had the XII stories. And so we were just chilling in his garage one day. He goes, hey man, have you heard of this song? And, he presses play, and I'm like, well, what is it? And it's the Notations, I'm Still Here, Darling Baby by the Elgins, the Midnighters, all these songs he started introducing me to, he had the collection of the XII stories, volumes 1 through 12, I believe. So I'm in my hip hop phase, and I'm starting to get into the oldies and, things of that nature. And, I got into some trouble like every other teenager does, you know what I mean? So ended up getting locked up and stuff, and, oldies were being played. There was this radio station that we used to listen to, called Mr. Payaso's Oldies out of San Jose. And people would call in and, they wouldn't call in, they would mail in dedications. And so, the disc jockey at that radio program, would read them out, and people would send in their, they would give shout outs to their loved ones or people that were incarcerated and stuff. So, that got me more hooked into more oldies,
Yeah.
And that's how I began my journey, starting from that teenage phase up until now,
Yeah. So when did you start collecting vinyl? Like as soon as you got into oldies as a teenager, or was that already like as you got older?
Well, as a teenager, what I was doing, I was recording oldies off a radio station called Radio Bilingüe out of Fresno. So I would buy like blank tapes, and I would every oldie that would come on the radio, I would record it. And I would kind of just write down, because I didn't know the names. Sometimes the disc jockeys back then didn't say the names or the group artists. So I would kind of write down, this is what the rola's about, Still Waters by the Four Tops, So I would write everything down. So I collected everything in cassettes, and there were blank tapes, you know. So over the years, like when I got to my 20s and whatnot, you know, I started like reminiscing back to those tapes, you know, and looking for these, you know, because now I wanted to, you know, hey, it'd be nice to just have them on record, you know. And come to find out, my mom had a lot of those 45s that were playing at the time on the station. So, not me knowing, I'll go, you know, I asked my mom, hey, do you still have those 45s? And she's like, yeah. And you know, I've always kept them. You know, they're not in the best condition, you know, because obviously one of us when we were young, we'd play frisbee with them without even knowing. You know what I mean? But that, you know, I ended up getting that music from my mom. You know, I started collecting the 45s. I didn't get into the heavy records up until, I would say, 2004. That's when I really started collecting the heavy stuff and got it in, and started getting into more, knowing about the music, you know, because this particular station.
Hold up. Before we get into that, what even got you into wanting to collect it? Like, vital, like, what inspired you to say, okay, like, I'm gonna pursue this full time. Like, I love this music. I'm gonna go look for these records. Like, what inspired you to start doing that?
What inspired me was this radio station called Radio Bilingüe. There was a DJ collector named Mark Anthony Sanchez, aka the Bad Boy Sounds. So I would listen to that station, and I would call from time to time and, hey, what was that rollout you played? You know, you know, is the song hard to get? I mean, is there anything way I can get a copy on CD or what? He's like, no, I got the record. You know, I found the record at a radio shop, and from then on. So the more we started talking, he started educating me more about the music, and he invited me one time to his show. You know, mind you, I'm in my early 20s, you know, and I'm just this kid, like, not wanting to know about music. I walk into the radio station. He's like, hey, we introduced each other, and that's when he started schooling me on a lot of the music that he was playing. He goes, and he started showing me 45s, and he was pretty much my mentor when it came down to, like, Rare Sweet Soul and, you know, groups like that. You know, like the Ethics at that time was considered Rare Soul. Skip Mahoney and the Casuals, just to name a few, you know. Yeah. So that's pretty much how I started my journey, by collecting those types of 45s with those types of groups. So, and it just skyrocketed from there. The more I dug, the more I started, you know, listening to more music, and as soon as you know, he's got other guests, other collectors on that station. You know, he would have special programs. And he would say, you know what, this upcoming so-and-so day, we're going to have a collector. You know, he collects, like, Rare Sweet Soul. He's got a good collection. And so I would tune in, you know, and I'm like, well, who are these guys, you know? Because I would look up to them. And I remember the first show he had was Nick Aguirre from Soulful Things. So he pretty much got on the show. He was just playing a bunch of rolas that were like, wow, you know, to me now, this is some heavy stuff. I'm talking about rare, obscure, you know, 45s, you know, and he would play them live. And sooner than you know, I got in touch with him. I made my connections, and, you know, he started, you know, kind of just pledging, you know, the love of those type of music. He's like, man, this music is not for everybody. You know, and to say that at that time I was so involved into it, I wanted to learn more. And as the years went by, I just started collecting, and, you know, I honestly couldn't remember what was my first Rare 45, you know, but
that was my next question.
Well,
do you remember your first one?
I think, you know, it was the Ethics, Sad Story. That was my first Rare 45. I mean, it was known, but not to an extent where the oldies that are being played now. This particular record back then was just like a $10 45, you know. But to me, that was one of my first rare records that I started collecting. You know, and then obviously.
Do
Yes.
you remember? Do you remember that feeling like when you first bought your record, like your own record? You know that feeling you get like, oh, like I got my first record.
When I got my first record, honestly,
Yeah.
I didn't even want to play it.
I remember when I first bought mine, I felt all bad. Like, yep, now I got this.
Oh yeah, I mean, and back then we didn't have social media, so I had
Yeah.
nothing to brag about. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
I was very when it came to records, I was so fragile with them because it's just so perfect. I don't want to even play it. I don't even want to look at it. I just want to have it in
Yeah.
the box, knowing that hey, that's a collectibles item right
Yeah.
there.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Do you like with you collecting vinyl, what do you think it was besides like? I know you said that what hooked you were the ballads. Like, what, when you say ballads, like, can you elaborate, like, for the listener that maybe, doesn't really know the difference, like, what's like a ballad oldie?
A ballad oldie is considered, well, to me, I mean, many people may have different opinions, but it's basically a slow song with a love ballad attached to it. To me, there's just different styles of soul music. There's fast ballads, they have the crossovers, and there's those slow ballad ones. It's more of
Like
how can
heavy.
I say this?
It's heavy.
Yes.
Like, it's heavier.
It's more heavier, and it's got more sentimental value to it, I so to speak.
Yeah.
When it comes to collecting that type of music.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to soul, I mean, soul music, it's an umbrella with what lies under the soul, like Northern Soul crossover, the ballads and stuff like that. So, I mean, I can try to put it in perspective the way I have it, memorized to where I just love the slow stuff. That was and not knowing that a lot of the stuff was also the cruising jams too. The slower the rola, the low we go on when we're cruising. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the better you ride, right? Like,
yeah.
and you have to find, that's what I trip out on. It's like, when you're cruising, you gotta have that right song. Like, and sometimes you go, put it back, make sure you put it on pause. That way, as soon as you turn that corner.
Yeah. I mean, believe it or not.
Pause.
Right? Believe it or not, even the moving and grooving ones were cruisable too,
Yeah.
But I always thought that, because I was real picky back then collecting. I just wanted to collect the stuff that sounded slow and that talked about love and and things of that nature. So
yeah. I always say this. Like, I know I mention it on every podcast. Like, people are probably tired, but of hearing me say this. But like for me, like, I don't know why I've always been into the super heavy, slow, like, like in my personal time, that's what you'll find me listening to, like the heavy, slow, like, I tell everybody, like, the slower the better for me.
Yeah.
It's just like, on my personal time, right? Of course, like, when I'm with my family or I have people, like, I do something more upbeat, but it's just something about the melody of a heavy, rare soul, like, you know what I mean? It's so different, it hits different, and that's personally what I like to listen to as well.
Yeah, it all depends how you attach yourself to that rola, whatever you're going through. I mean, there's always that one particular song that just gravitates to you. It's like, oh man, I can relate to this rola here, and even if you're going through hard times, sometimes that's just a meditating form of therapy. Sometimes if you're in the dark side, or you're going through a lot of trauma. I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, that was my remedy for dealing with heartbreak and all that. So that's why that type of soul ballads, what I would consider rare sweet soul, was the one that just, I just had to have on vinyl. So
Yeah, and I think not only that, but like also like I always say like oldies are enhancers to whatever it is. Sometimes like oldies, and I'm sure like with any other genre of music, right? But like some like, have you ever been so like lost for words that like the song that you're playing is speaking for you? You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't have the right words to say. Sometimes you don't even know what it is you're feeling, and you hear a
Mhm.
song and it's like, yep, like sometimes you'll just put the song like, let this song speak for me.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is
Yeah,
exactly what I feel. This.
right. And yeah, I can have a playlist going, and whatever mood I'm in,
Yeah.
a particular song may come on and it just speaks to me,
Yeah.
and I believe, that's why, it's entitled Soul for that reason. I'm not
Yeah.
quoting it but when, songs do speak to you, in any form
Yeah.
of way, where however you want to look at it, there's always that one rola.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Like, even just to, like, I don't know, I like to vibe out by myself, like, just listening to, like, music.
Yeah.
All there. I'll be like, just leave me by myself in my room. Like, I'm good.
Yeah, because I've always said, music is the key remedy to solve your
Everything.
issues, to solve your problems,
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
so you've been collecting vinyl. Now, what has collecting vinyl gotten you into? So I know like you've worked on projects. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So at the time when I started collecting vinyl back in 2004, I didn't have the biggest collection like most of these guys that I looked up to, because I was also collecting CDs, compilations such as Underground Oldies, Lost Soul Oldies, To Every Story, Toker's Oldies, Soulful Things, I was into that stuff, So I would collect that type of music, those CDs, just to listen to rollouts, knowing that, hey, I'm gonna be on the hunt for that record, and that's what I would mainly do, is listen to those CDs to go and find and do my research to hunt for these records. And I remember one time I came across this magazine. There was an article in there, an advertisement for a brand new compilation coming out soon. It said Gangster Soul Harmony, and it had a website. It had, I believe, it had a phone number. Actually, it did have a phone number, and it said George Miller Jr. Volume 1, Gangster Soul Harmony, coming soon. So, I bought the magazine. It was a street level magazine. I bought it, brought it home, gave him a call, and I was like, hey, when is the CD coming out? Hey, I'm into this type of music, how did you go about it, man? I've been collecting for about a year now. I was surprised he actually answered the phone, Shout out to George Miller Jr. So we were talking, and he's like, hey, man, so, I didn't know, because he gave a little bit of history, a little bit of rundown on, the projects that he was involved. He was involved with Lost Soul Oldies with Sal Rodriguez and Robert Ramos, And so he started, giving me a little history, background, and I was like, cool, like I said, I've never heard of this series. I've been collecting Lost Soul for a while now. He's like, yeah, so the more we started talking about records and whatnot, I would introduce him to some of the stuff I was finding. Hey, check this out, check out this rollout. And one day, he gives me a call and he's like, hey, how would you like to get involved on the next project that I'm working on? I'm working on volume 3, because at the time he already had volume 1 and 2. So he goes, I'm working on volume 3. Would you like to join and be a part of Sons of Soul Records? You could contribute some of your collection, and we'll put it out on CD. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm down with it, I remember my first time meeting George. I was living in Merced at that time, so I drove, down south met up with George, had a box with me full of records, and it was just a good time. That was like my first experience, exchanging and talking about records with somebody down there. So we pretty much put the project together. We worked on Volume 3, and then we were there were so many rolas put together. He was like, you know what? I'm gonna need you for Volume 4. I was like, all right. So we had plenty of 45 records to spare, and to make Volume 4, and then Volume 5, and then I think it was after Volume 4 he started working on a other project called Gangster Girls Harmony Volume 1. So I contributed one or two 45s there. So it was a pretty good rundown within those years. I believe it was 2006 up until like 2008. So there was another collector that was also part of Sons of Soul Records. May he rest in peace. Is Bobby Medina, the Playboy of Soul. So he was also contributing as well when it came to George Miller Jr. putting out these volumes.
Yeah, Bobby Medina, I've definitely heard about him a lot. I never had the opportunity to meet him, but definitely hear that he was a legend for sure.
Oh, most definitely. And like I said, I mean, over the years, I just started, reconnecting with a lot of old collectors and then meeting new collectors, you know what I mean? So I can honestly say, I had mentors, from all walks of life, There's another guy out of Chicago whose name is Bob Abrahamian. He passed away in 2008, I believe. So, I gravitated a lot of my collection. My collection, pretty much, a lot of the stuff that I have in my collection now all came from him. He was always sparing me like, hey, I have a second copy of this. It's a little beat up, but hey, I wanted it so bad just to have the song, and especially on the 45. So he was another one of my mentors. He did a show. He had a program in Chicago called Sitting in the Park. So I was always, like I said, I was always calling in and wanting to know. And luckily, I mean, these guys were humble enough to, teach me and educate me when it came to this type of music.
That's so dope. And I know you spoke a little bit about your project. Do you remember the first time you got invited to go spin?
You know what? To be quite honest, I'm always getting invited to go spin, but I've never actually spun at an event, so to speak.
Okay.
Me being me living in Merced is kind of like, I'm hours away from a lot of these guys that I communicate with. They're always like, hey, you know what? Make it down here on the weekend. The tables are free, and I'm always getting invited, and I feel bad because. My job at the time, it was like, it was hard to ask for a day off, just to make it out there. And, so it was kind of hectic. Knowing that I really wanted to go, I was always getting invited to go spin. But recently, here in Merced, there's a DJ named Chisel. Shout out to Chisel. We started doing, this session every Wednesday of the month. It's a brewing lounge, so we're able to just set up there and play music for the people there and stuff like that. So I can honestly say that's like my first time actually spinning at an event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like I told the guys, the collectors that I communicate, they're always like, hey man, whenever you're ready, come down here. The tables are open.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
So are there any other projects that you've worked on or anything else that collecting vinyl has gotten you into?
I worked on a small little project back in, cause see, I took a break from 2013 up until 2020, up until the pandemic. I pretty much put a pause to record collecting. I wasn't searching. I just pretty much put all my records aside and started focusing on, on life itself. But when I came back into the scene, so to speak, I did put out a little small project, Confessions of a Vinyl Addict, Volume 1. I only pressed about 100 of those, so it was nothing really big. It was just something I put together, just to get myself out there again, because back then I wasn't going by Arsoulnal. I was going by the Soul Seeker back then. So a lot of the collectors that I reconnected, they pretty much didn't remember me at the time. So they were like, oh, well, you go by Arsoulnal now, and that's a cool name and blah, blah, yada, yada, So that was like the project besides, working with George Miller on Gangsters Harmony. That was like the most recent project that I got myself involved.
Yeah, and that's oldies, like an oldie project, like a compilation?
It's a compilation. It's an oldies compilation of my personal collection.
And what is it called?
Confessions of a Vinyl Addict, Volume 1.
So, I like that. I was like, what? An addict? What addict? I was like, duh, vinyl addict.
Yeah, I mean, if vinyl addicts would understand, I was going to call it the 12 steps of yuri yuri, but I don't know. I just thought I came up with that, So.
That's funny. That's pretty dope. That's cool. So are you involved with anything right now? You just like, or just like coming out of retirement? What you got going on right now?
There's never a retirement when it comes to record collecting. I'm doing this till I hit the grave, you know what I mean? Yeah, as far as right now, there's not a project in mind. Me and this other collector out of Vegas, his name's Tricky. Call him Mr. Tricky. We had in mind of putting a compilation together on vinyl. I don't know if that's still in the works. We were just kind of coming up with ideas and whatnot. But if we do end up making it happen, we want to, push that towards the next year, because we were just talking about that recently, But as far as I know, I don't got anything going on with putting out any projects besides that,
Yeah. In the meantime, just keep collecting.
just collecting, I'll go record hunting here and there. I'll tell the wife, you know what, I'm gonna go down to the record shop, be there for a couple hours, you know what I mean? Then sooner than you know, you're there gigging, and it's just like, oh wow, it seems like I've only been here for 5 minutes,
Yeah, but you get lost in there, man. You go in as day and come out as nighttime already.
It's like a little kid at a toy store,
Yeah, you do. You could spend hours in there. Well, my last question is, what advice do you have for any upcoming, vinyl record collectors?
Just stay on the hunt, keep digging, do it for the love of music, the passion. I mean, this is something, it's not a phase, A lot of people like to get the misconception of it being a pop culture thing, but I mean, if you love records, you love to spin, you like to collect, by any means, go for it. I mean, don't let anything stop you from collecting. It becomes a very expensive habit, I tell you that. But in the meanwhile, if you love doing what you love to do, by any means, give it a go, and keep going for it. You know what I mean?
For sure, that's dope. Well, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and for doing the interview with us. I'm super excited. I wish you a lot of luck. If you do come out with that project, definitely let me know. I want to hear your compilation.
Thank you.
But where can people find you at? I know you're on Instagram. That's where me and you connected. Are you anywhere else? Any other platforms?
As far as right now, just Instagram. YouTube is more of a personal account that I have. I really don't go much on there, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. So you can find me there under Arsoulnal on my Instagram page.
Dope. All right. Well, any last words before we conclude?
I would like to just give some shout outs, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, first and foremost, shout out to you for allowing me to, be on this platform. I thank you for having us collectors expose, our history, the love for this music, and we appreciate, folks like you for having us on these type of podcasts, and then Shout out to George Miller Jr. Shout out to a lot of, I mean, there's too many to name. But the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, I mean, Anthony Santana. Shout out to Robert Galan Jr., Larry Lopez. Shout out to Mike Noriega, Hugo. Shout out to Victor Bustillos, Richard Suavecito, OC Soul, Roland, Noe, and Ruben. Shout out to, there's so many to name. Acro from San Jose, Danny Cascon, David Capone. Shout out to JoJo, Ray from Southside Soul, Rela, Sigs, Drew Collage, Monster Mike. Shout out to Sal Samano from the Sacred Souls, One Love. Who else? Yeah, there's just so many. Luda, Rampart. Shout out to Cardina Soul, Whittier Boulevard, Two Smooth Sounds, Bosco. There's a lot of collectors out of Arizona. Chavo, Ernie G, Imperial Soul, Joker, you know what I mean? Shout out to the ones in Texas, Trey Uno Oldies, Yeah, that's, like I said, there's only one way to, get this going,
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, thank you so much, again, Arsoulnal, for giving us your time. I had a great time. That's dope, man. Like, where I'm from. I know where you're from.
That's a trip right there.
Yeah. All right, guys, so that does conclude episode number 12 here on the Barrio Love OD podcast, and we will catch you on the next one.